And I'm joined now in studio by Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who has been outspoken this week opposing the Trump administration's latest move. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Good to have you here this morning. You have used incredibly strong language, a constitutional crisis, grossly unconstitutional, pretty alarming language.
Yeah, listen, I think this is the most serious constitutional crisis the country has faced. Certainly since Watergate, the president is attempting to seize control of power and for corrupt purposes. The president wants to be able to decide how and where money is spent so that he can reward his political friends, he can punish his political enemies. That is the evisceration of democracy. You stand that next to the wholesale endorsement of political violence with the pardons given to every single January 6th rioter, including the most violent who beat police officers over the head with baseball bats. And you can see what he's trying to do here. He is trying to crush his opposition by making them afraid of losing federal funding, by making them afraid of physical violence. And so, yes, this is a red alert moment when this entire country has to understand that our democracy is at risk. And for what? The billionaire takeover of government. I'm sure we'll talk about this, but Elon Musk is inside our federal agencies.
But let me just say right now, they want to cut the federal budget. They would all disagree that it's corruption or anything else. They want to cut the federal budget and the workforce. Do you have issues with that?
Well, I don't, but there is no evidence that that is the goal. Ultimately, at USAID, they sent a whole bunch of people home who are still getting paid. And I think you have to ask, why are they doing this if it's not actually accruing any savings? And to me, again, the reason is that somebody like Elon Musk stands to gain from the closure of USAID. It makes America much less safe around the world, but it helps China. USAID is a thorn in the side of the Chinese government. Elon Musk has many major business interests at stake inside Beijing, and so making Beijing happy is going to accrue to the financial benefit of Elon Musk and many billionaires who outsource work to China.
Senator, you have the court process working. A judge has now barred Elon Musk teams from the Treasury database. They have blocked Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. So why not just let the system work?
Well, I mean, first of all, we're not sure it's working right now. I continue to get reports from Connecticut that agencies there, like Head Start programs and community health centers, are actually not receiving the funding that they are due. So I think there's a big question as to whether the administration actually is implementing the court order. And the pace of this assault on the Constitution in order to serve the billionaire class, it is absolutely dizzying. And so you have to run a full-scale opposition. You can't just rely on the courts. Ultimately, you've got to bring the American public into this conversation because we need our Republican colleagues in the House and in the Senate ultimately to put a stop to this. You cannot just rely on the court system when the challenge to the Constitution and the billionaire takeover is so acute and so urgent.
You talk about the American public. According to a recent Reuters Ipsos poll, a majority of Americans, 56%, support freezing U.S. foreign aid programs, excluding the life-saving assistance. So what would you say to those people when Donald Trump and Elon Musk say, what we are trying to do is exactly what you want?
But they're not freezing programs. They are eliminating the entire department. Their plan is to go from 14,000 employees down to 300.
And fold it into the State Department?
Well, no, they're talking about eliminating it. I mean, that's just a talking point, folding it into the State Department. They were lying when they said that. They are eliminating the department altogether. When you go from 14,000 employees to 300, you have no soft power left in the world. The military tells us that if you eliminate foreign aid, you will have to double the number of bullets you buy them. Why? Because we prevent conflict around the world through things like economic development and conflict resolution. I think think the American public are learning about the scale of this corruption, how our foreign policy is being turned over to billionaires like Elon Musk to help them financially. And as the American people are learning how much influence the billionaires have and how corrupt our policy has become, they are turning against this handover of government to the very few economic elites.
Senator, do talk a little bit about USAID and how it works. It's a subsidy program. The taxpayer dollars pay farmers for soy or rice, and then those are donated, correct? How much of it is a subsidy?
Well, listen, most of what USAID is doing is employing Americans and often foreign nationals to try to prevent instability and conflict. They are also working to try to reduce the reasons why young people join terrorist groups overseas. They are chasing Chinese and Russian influence. I mean, listen, the major question of the next 50 years is who will control the piping of the international economy, the United States or China? It's USAID, not the U.S. military, that is working to try to blunt Chinese influence. So it's ultimately American and European rules that control the global economy, not Chinese rules. So USAID is out there protecting American jobs and American interests. And if you roll up USAID, it is just a massive gift to China in particular. And that is very bad for U.S. national security interests, very bad for the U.S. economy and U.S. workers.
You talk about the Democrats. Senator John Fetterman is urging his fellow Democrats to calm down a bit on language exactly like yours, saying if you keep yelling, people are going to stop paying attention. Democrats have already used the most severe kinds of language and condemnation. It's going to lose its value and no one's going to pay attention to it. Your response?
I don't agree. I'm not going to calm down. I had 800 people at a rally with 24 hours notice in Connecticut this last weekend. This is a fundamental corruption. And democracies don't last forever. And what those who are trying to destroy democracies want is for everyone to stay quiet, for everyone to believe that the moment isn't urgent. They want to use violence and the threat of violence and the threat of arrest to keep the opposition at home. We are not going to do this. We see this as a crisis of epic proportions. We were watching the billionaires try to steal government from the people. And I think the broad cross-section of the American public, as you've seen in the last week, is going to rise up and say enough. If they want to...
We have seen in the last week, we've seen people rise up, we've seen protests, but these are not massive protests. How do you keep doing this? Who is leading this in the Democratic Party? What is the vision?
Well, I mean, we're only 2 weeks into the administration, and you have
and yet you knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, and you have seen some very big crowds, but I don't think the American public knew what was going to happen. I mean, I don't think that Donald Trump ran on giving his billionaire advisor access to Americans' personal financial data, access to their Medicare and Medicaid records. So I do think there's a lot of people out there who didn't think Donald Trump was going to do some of the most reckless things he said, and certainly didn't think that the conflicted billionaires were going to have access to their personal information.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us, Senator. We appreciate it.
Thank you.